and welcome to our webinar on relapse prevention for recovering counselors and peer advocates. My name is Mary McCarty Arias, and I will be your trainer for the next 2 hours. So welcome, and good afternoon if you're on the East Coast, good morning if you're on the West Coast. Wherever you are, we are glad that you are here. I am representing the Northeast and Caribbean ATTC, Addiction Technology and Transfer Center, and our catchment area is New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. I think the good thing about the ATTC network is that these webinars are available to people all over the country and actually all over the world. So if people want to open your chat, and many of you know how to do that, but you go to the top of the slide, open where it says chat, and if people want to start writing in where you're from, your name and where you're from, that's always helpful. So let me get started. Let me say too that this course, and I'll tell you actually the history of the course as it was developed. Many years ago, I was really interested in this topic because a lot of people who I knew who were counselors or peers were relapsing. And whenever I went to look for information that was specific to counselors or peer advocates, there was none. There would be specific relapse prevention groups for doctors, for nurses, for actors and actresses in New York City. And yet I called Dr. Alan Marlett, who unfortunately he has passed, but he was one of the gurus of relapse prevention, and I told him what I wanted to do, and he said, you know what, we haven't done anything on that. So I said, well, I'm going to try, and that's where this came from. So thanks. So we've got people from Staten Island, people from Chicago. Welcome. I don't know if the person from Chicago is a basketball fan of the Loyola team. Some of you who know me know I'm a sports fan. So watching March Madness, the college basketball games, is a good distraction for the moment. Does that have anything to do with relapse prevention? No, not necessarily. So let me go on. This disclaimer is in every course that we do. And the key, by the way, is that we just want to make sure that you know that what is coming today is representative of the Northeast and Caribbean Addiction Technology and Transfer Center. And when you see where it says PI, Mike Chappell, who is the director of the Northeast ATTC. The key is that this course was developed. We are funded by SAMHSA, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration, but as it says there, this course does not necessarily represent the official views of SAMHSA. In addition, this slide is in every webinar that we do, and actually probably every webinar that people in the national ATTCs have put. And what they want to make sure is, and what we want to make sure is that language matters and words have power. And that, you know, we always talk about people first. You know, what does that mean in plain English? When I went to school, I think my first week of graduate school, I was studying rehabilitation counseling, which is helping people with disabilities get back to work. And the first thing they told us was to make sure that you say the person with the disability, even if it's wordy. So the person with substance use, the person with depression, the person with schizophrenia. And again, it helps us sometimes by language look at, you know, where it looks at your own values, and it helps you actually probably be a better clinician. So as at the bottom says, the ATTC network uses affirming language to promote the promises of recovery by advancing evidence-based and culturally informed practices. By the way, the ATC network, as I was saying, they have many, many courses. And in fact, there's probably 8 other courses being run at the same time as this one. So if you haven't been on that website, it's another place to go. Even in terms of language, I call this course Relapse Prevention for Recovering Counselors, but some of the peers I've worked with had said to me, Mary, you're not supposed to be using the term relapse prevention anymore. You're really supposed to be talking about recovery management. So I throw that out there. Actually, the literature, by the way, still says relapse prevention, but I think recovery management is a term that's often used. And even the term relapse, since the term relapse has kind of a negative connotation, that if you look at and call it the quote, return to use, it's something we can play with. Thanks, welcome. So Norwich, so we're upstate New York, East Brunswick. Thank you, welcome. So, as I said, I've been in the field for many years and started as a vocational rehabilitation counselor, working in drug treatment and also in a hospital that had people with co-occurring disorders. And as a vocational rehabilitation counselor, what I did was I helped people go back to their jobs and hopefully stay in recovery. What a common thing that used to happen in treatment is people would sign up for a session with me to find out what they wanted to do. And then as soon as they got their job back, they were like, Mary, I don't need to talk to you anymore. I got my job back and I'm going back to the job. And as many of you know, many of the jobs that people go back to, there's triggers all over the world. Some people had more triggers at their job than others. So we started some work and was doing a lot of groups in returning to work and recovery. And that's where some of this information has come from. So moving on. So just some housekeeping. Many of you know I like to do my courses from noon to 2 Eastern Standard. Actually, we're on daylight savings time, but I used to do it initially at this time because if people wanted to have lunch and go to courses, they could. So if you don't like those times, you could let me know, and I can always, at some point as I plan future ones, I'll let you know. Other things, if you're sharing a computer, please write your name in the chat box. So sometimes some of you are at your site and there's maybe 4 people sharing a computer. We used to have people sit in classrooms at treatment centers with 10 to 12 people in there. We just want to make sure that your name is in there. And if your name's in the chat, we'll make sure that you get an evaluation. At the end of this session, you will get the evaluation, and there's 3 ways to get it, and I'll go over that later on. And you will get a copy of the slides tomorrow. So a copy of the slides will be sent to you tomorrow. However, you will receive certificates. And now for those of you who are out of New York State, the CASAC and CPPP, CPS, these stand for some of the credentials that are given in New York State. They are good for 2 hours, so everybody will receive them if you stay for the whole 2 hours and fill out an evaluation. There is reciprocity in, I think, 33 states. So I know for those of you who are here from New Jersey, I know that there's reciprocity, and Chicago, Illinois, I don't know, but you will get the certificates. But just important to hear, the certificates will take 1 week to get, and that's 5 business days, because the certificates are generated by a person, Tree Chapel, who is our our project administrator, and she'll make sure you get a copy of the slides tomorrow. But we want to give her 5 business days to get the certificates out. So they're generated by her, not by a machine. So more guidelines. Today we're on WebEx, which means that I can't see you, you can't see me, and you'll be able to hear me, but I won't be able to hear you. So what I'll ask, by the way, is that use the chat box a lot. And you can write in questions as I present, and I'll ask you to answer questions in the chat box too. I find, and I've said this numerous times, but if I'm at a webinar and they ask me to type in things, I find like I pay attention. If I'm sitting there for an hour or two and the speaker doesn't ask me to do anything, I start to want to do other things. So I will use it, and actually it just makes it, I think, kind of fun. What I can't answer is questions about technology. Clyde Frederick, who is our IT person, who's also on this webinar. If you have something that is a technological problem, you can write that in the chat and he'll help you with that. Usually what happens is if it's just one person who has problems hearing, he'll take care of that. If it's everybody or I make a mistake, we'll let you know on that one. So Clyde will help you on that. I also can't answer questions about any certificates from last week or whenever you took a course, but we'll give you some emails at the end of the session so we can take care of you on that. Other things, by the way, just so you know, that on the chat, generally, if you see on the right bottom right hand corner of the chat, like mine is open right now to everyone. So if I write something in, everyone will be able to see. So just be aware that if you write something to everyone, everybody will be able to see it. And if you do not want everybody to see it, you can write a question in privately to me. I do that very purposely, by the way, because this course is about people, counselors and peers in recovery. You don't have to be in recovery to be on the call, on the webinar, and you do not have to share anything that's personal that you do not want shared. So I just want to be clear on that so we create safety for you on that. Another thing about relapse prevention courses is if you're in recovery, sometimes talking about triggers can, depending on your stage of recovery, can cause you to have cravings or can kind of set you off. So I always say is if some of the things that we talk about today in terms of triggers or relapse prevention, if it really kind of hits your buttons, please either call your sponsor or call a person who you talk to so that you can work that through. Right, I think that's as far as the guidelines. Yes, welcome everybody. So we have a lot of people from a variety of places. And again, glad that everybody is here. So what are the goals today? The goals really are to enhance you as counselor or a peer, your understanding of the dynamics of relapse for yourself, and also to develop tools for self-appraisal and early prevention and detection of relapse. And it'll fit into a lot of what we've been teaching in the past year around self-care, that self-care has been so important, and self-care really is a relapse prevention tool. But it's always helpful to kind of look at yourself and say, where am I in this? Are things going okay? Am I struggling? What's not working for me? Let me say that one of the very first times I offered this course in person, I thought, oh, what a great idea. I'm going to teach this course on recovery for counselors and peers. And very few people signed up. And the people who came were sometimes supervisors of people who were counselors or peers. So it's a little different in terms of a webinar. We still want to keep it safe for people. And again, you can write in questions privately. Now, I'll read the question, I just won't say your name, or you can write in the chat to everyone. But these are the goals. So what are some of the objectives? So today we'll look at some special issues for counselors and peer advocates in recovery. People generally, actually for anybody in recovery, there are often issues, but I think there are some really specific ones that affect counselors and peer advocates. So we'll talk about them. We'll also look at some of the terms that have been used like recovery, relapse, and slip. We'll look at some warning signs for relapse biologically, psychologically, socially, and spiritually. And you know that usually when people relapse, it's never a surprise. It's often been kind of a process of warning signs, and ideally what happens is as you assess for yourself or even for other clients or for people you're working with, is how to look at what are those early warning signs, because early is really about preventing it. Sometimes if you wait too long, it doesn't work. We'll also look at the difference between early and late warning signs of relapse. So yeah, what happens early on, and everybody's different on that one, and I'll share some of the experiences I've had with some of the counselors I've worked with that they've told me. And then we'll also look at maybe specific triggers on the job and ways to deal with them. So those are the objectives. Now, on the next slide, I'm going to do a write-in. And remember what I said, you don't have to write in if you don't want to, but I'm going to say that the first question, and I'll ask you to write in, if you want to, is how does your job help your recovery? Now, if you're not in recovery or you don't want to share that you're in recovery, you could do it kind of in the third person, like how does being a counselor or a peer help people's recovery? So let's go with that one first. I'll ask you to think about it. Please write in and let's see what you have. Thanks, Marietta. Yeah, stress more now due to the pandemic, people leaving, quitting, being fired. Yeah, that has been, I appreciate you saying that because I think the pandemic, and as I was like re-looking at some of the course, has really changed um, why, what we're doing. Thanks. Lynn, there is reciprocity between my clients and I. Thank you. Helps me remember why I got clean in the first place. Thank you, Jessica. Reminds me of the tools that I can use to help myself as well as my clients. Thanks. Thank you to Neil. So if other people want to keep writing, yeah. Thanks, Nathan. Helps me stay attuned to my underlying problems. Thank you. Anybody else? I know it's interesting because when I ask a question on a webinar, first you have to think about it and then you have to type it in. So if I pause, it's because I'm doing that, letting you kind of think it out. So anybody else about looking at how your job helps your recovery, or how being a counselor or a peer helps people's recovery? Thanks, Murph. Our center has 12-step meetings daily that I can attend and do. Actually, that has enhanced my recovery. Thank you. So it kind of keeps it simple. I was interviewing friends of mine, I guess, in the past couple of weeks because I knew I was doing this course. And what a lot of people would say was one of the ways it helps them stay in recovery is it does help them remember where they were and what they went through. And it also gives them a sense of giving back. Thank you. Let's see. So what else? Allow people to open up about how they are really feeling. Yeah. Thank you, Valerie. So I think that you don't really have to answer the top question, but to kind of think it out. Okay, oh good, people are writing in. Helps me to know that I'm not alone. We're all in this together, vicarious and secondary trauma. It can help contribute to recovery because it's focused on creating sobriety and the environment is generally safe to a certain degree. Yes, We hope that, right? We also have a peer advocate support meeting once a week, peer support for peer advocates and recovery coaches. I think that is great also. So here's another question. There's a question at the bottom, and you don't have to answer it for yourself, but how does being a counselor or a peer? Yeah, thanks, Joyce. My recovery allows me to be empathetic. Absolutely. So those are lots of reasons of how your job does help your recovery. Here's another question. How does your job hinder your recovery? And again, you don't have to write if you're not comfortable, but how does your job sometimes get in the way of your recovery? Maybe it doesn't, but that's my open-ended question. How does your job hinder your recovery? Yes, thank you. It can become stressful and overwhelming. Yes. Painful to watch others struggle. Thank you. Thanks, Jessica. Ooh, working in a toxic environment with no support from supervisors. Ouch. Yeah, that would hinder one's recovery. You're always working to help others with their recovery. It may interfere with time for your own recovery. And that happens a lot, that sometimes people take care of other people and they don't take care of themselves. And it is a lot of responsibility. Colleagues who are not in recovery sometimes do not understand, although they are clinicians, you bet. I'm going to be careful, I think, with saying names so that I don't say the name of somebody who wrote in privately. So you can all see what everyone has written. I'll read sometimes what people have written privately. It's hard emotionally when having to set boundaries and make decisions about pure connections to establish. Yes, that is really a big challenge. Thank you for writing that. Right, I'm going to go to the next slide. And this is a list of, I think, special issues for counselors and peers in recovery. So let's see what we have here. Some of this came from the work I've done. Some of it came from, actually, from the literature. Oh yeah, oh yeah, compassion fatigue. Thanks again, as people are still right. Sometimes all the clients' feelings and experiences are overwhelming. I think these days too, especially, it's also good to have a group meeting 15 minutes before work so we can put our feelings out. And that's a healthy thing to be doing. So thanks again for writing in. I think one of the reasons I put this about the consequences is that sometimes people can relapse and they have a job. Let's say they are a bookkeeper or they work on Wall Street or they're an attorney. And sometimes when people relapse and they have other jobs, the consequences aren't so bad. What I have seen, and again, and this is just more my anecdotal research on this, is that sometimes when counselors or peers do relapse, it, quote, messes up with their jobs sometimes. The good news, by the way, is the Americans for Disabilities Act protects people who are in recovery. Except the problem is if you relapse on an illegal drug, you lose that. But it really speaks to, again, I think there's higher expectations of counselors. And that's the second bullet. I think there's a higher expectation of recovery. And some of you know this. My late husband was a counselor for many years and also attended NA for actually 30 years before he died. And I think because he was a pretty charismatic person, there was a real high expectation. You could see it among clients or people he sponsored or people at the treatment center when we work together, they kind of expect the counselor to have perfect recovery and not deal with some of those issues that everybody deals with. So I think there is almost a higher expectation of recovery for some of you. In addition, there's triggers on the job. People were writing about, I used to actually, generally, what's supposed to happen is a treatment center should be a place of safety, but somebody wrote that they were in a toxic environment. And another thing about the triggers on the job is that you're listening to stories of people who have been using, and it may be part of their war stories, but some of those stories that you continue to hear can be a trigger. For those of you who are peers, and I know as peers, you deal with different places of where you work. So some of you are doing outreach, some of you are doing home visits, and think about kind of the triggers on the job if you are doing a lot of your work in a park or you are doing a lot of your work in home visits. So there are certainly triggers on the job. There's actually just general triggers on jobs anyway, which we'll go over later on. Yeah, to the person who just wrote in privately, I will answer that question privately. So triggers on the job. I'm going to just answer that. And countertransference is a trigger, and that kind of goes to whenever your own issues come up when you're working with people. I think that certainly can, I don't know why the term kick your butt is coming into mind. I know that's not a clinical term, but sometimes you hear stuff and it just hits you in a way that you didn't expect. And then finally, actually managing AA or NA as a counselor or peer, and some of you can write in on this if you like, but what sometimes used to happen is, and actually somebody was saying that one of the advantages of your job is that you do have AA or NA meetings on the job, and that is a really good thing. The challenge sometimes too is that if you are at an AA or NA meeting and then you see clients that you've been working with or clients that you used to work with, then you have to start to figure out for yourself, what do I share? What don't I share? Do I keep going to this meeting? What do I do with this? And I had a friend who was actually, he's back in recovery, but he said that one of his jobs was taking the clients out to AA and NA meetings regularly. And so what happened though is when he was taking them, he was focusing more on them than on his own recovery. And so even though he could say he was attending 3 to 4 meetings a week, he wasn't really working on himself specifically. Ultimately, he did relapse and then got back into recovery, actually, and changed fields, and now is a very successful real estate person. So those are just some special issues for counselors in recovery and peers. So I don't know if people want to, you can add, next slide, I'll actually talk a little bit about relapse rates. So, I'll ask your, what have you heard? Part of it, I have an idea of what you've heard, but one of the things about relapse rates 2020, and even we're still in 2021, and we're still pretty much in lockdown. So the influence of COVID on relapse, what I've heard for the past year from people on the webinars is they've lost a lot of their clients. Many people have relapsed, people have disappeared. So I'll just throw out the question from your own, just it could be anecdotal, but from your own experience or at your own sites, what have you heard about relapse? It could be relapse for clients, and what about relapse for counselors or peers? Yeah, significant increase in relapse this past year. Definitely. Yeah, for clients and for people that you know. Increase in general anxiety, depression, and fear in social settings. You know, it's interesting because I think many of us thought that this pandemic would not last so long. I mean, I remember, I think March 15th was the last day I was in my office and I was at the subway stop on Fordham Road and I kept hearing that things were going to close down. And I thought, this can't happen. This is New York. And then what happened was everything closed down. So you thought, okay, it's going to be 2 weeks. And then it's gone on for a year. And what I've seen, by the way, or heard from friends of mine and colleagues is that the length of it has really started to kind of hit people in a different way. And yes, okay, let's see what people are writing in. Right, there's no in-person 12-step meetings. You know, that's a big issue. There are a few, the ones that I seem to know around where I am, they'll start in person and then someone will get COVID and they'll close. But for many people, it's Zoom, Zoom, Zoom. There has been long-term recovery. Yeah. And, you know, when you look at, by the way, why people relapse in long-term recovery, it's usually not people, places, and things, but sometimes it's boredom. Sometimes it's big events that a person has to deal with. All right, somebody wrote in privately, my folks have actually done better. AANA helped them live in the moment. Oh, yeah, one day at a time. Absolutely. I think that's a term that I have used for I mean, I use it anyway, but it seems to be very, I don't know, apropos because you can't really plan too much. I mean, you can plan, but it's really one day at a time. Yeah, an increase in suicidal thoughts. So yes. Yeah, people who've never had challenges have had challenges. So, you know, we work at least I used to be situated at the New York State Psychiatric Institute, which is part of Columbia or New York Presbyterian, and we get regular kind of we get regular letters from Dr. Jeffrey Lieberman, who's head of the hospital. And what they do say, by the way, is that for many people, when this is over, 2/3 of people will get back to quote normal, and 1/3 of people will be dealing with still dealing with depression or anxiety. For those of you who work in adolescent treatment centers or have adolescents, it just seems that the number of adolescents, which actually has always been high in terms of depression and anxiety, is really like off the charts. Okay, I'm just reading what we have: a detox, a residential rehab, supportive living and recovering center. And in the last year, the number of relapse, overdoses and loss of clients has skyrocketed. Yeah, so if you work with youth and adolescents, you know, one I always tell my nieces, the good thing about getting older is you know that if something happens, you'll get through it. But when you're 16 and you can't go to your prom or you can't even go to school to see your friends, it just seems like it's the end of the world. So um, um, I guess the challenge of youth and adolescence is you don't have those experiences, although they'll certainly learn from these experiences. So the key, by the way, is that I think the numbers have been really high. One of the reasons I didn't quote a study because it's whenever you put statistics or epidemiology on, let's say, in a webinar, usually the rates for 2020 won't be published for a while. So some of it's anecdotal and some of it's, you know, what we've heard from other people or read in the newspapers. All right, so let's look then at some of the definitions that have been used. This came out from SAMHSA, Substance Use and Mental Health Services Administration, I think in approximately 2010, so it's like 11 years ago. And it was their new definition. And here's what it said. It's a process of change through which individuals improve their health and wellness, check, live a self-directed life, and strive to reach their full potential. So what do you think about that? If you want to write in, what do you think about that definition? Yes, the term improve is left for interpretation. Absolutely. I think that in a way that was done purposefully. Yeah, and so and actually that's a really good point. So that what you think, and I'm reading what you said, my idea of improvement is not your standard. So it really goes back to ourselves, for yourself. What do you look at as for improvement? Not everybody will agree, and that's okay. Actually, I'll look at the next slide. We'll look at a self-directed life look like in our culture. We'll start to answer that. Or actually, let's answer it now because people are writing that. So what do you think it means to live a self-directed life? Self-directed life. Yeah, and as again, I'm going to try not to mention names. What is each person's potential? How do we determine our potential? Good questions to answer. Okay. Yeah, the reason I actually put out your asking your comments is because the very first time that I trained on this, everybody said, no, we hate that. We don't like this definition. People didn't like it, by the way, in 2010 or 2012 because it didn't say anything about abstinence. And prior writings or books, depending on how long you've been in the field, would talk about abstinence. Oh, good. So many of you are answering it. So when you have no self-control, it means living life on life's terms and managing anything that comes your way, good, bad, or indifferent. I'm going to say one of the things too. All right, somebody says they love the definition. It meets the person where they're at. Thank you. Yeah, you make your own world, and that is true. And didn't they used to have an army advertisements, be all that you can be? So that be all you can be, everybody's going to be at a different be all you can be. So yeah, so people have been writing self-directed can be a little dangerous. You know what, when we look at the next slide, we'll come back to that. Yeah, next is somebody wrote, you're the driver of your own destiny. Self-directed, I'm wondering if too, from a cultural point of view, that can be interpreted or misinterpreted about, what that means. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, because in fact, you've heard this in a lot of courses before that in some cultures, when people are making decisions, that it's really about family relationships. Whereas, actually, I was just attended a webinar, and it was on culture, and what the person was saying is that when you really talk about where people are, she said from a Caucasian point of view, people look at one of the values is achieving, or getting things or acquiring things, but that some of the values among, let's say, and again, it sounds like it's a generalization, but among African Americans is relationships. And so I think that's why I think as people are writing in, you kind of have to look at who you're working with and whether that fits in for you. I remember, having, if you've heard this story before, you can say, oh God, she's telling that story again. But I was doing a training in Connecticut, and it was with case managers who worked in the welfare office. And one of the case managers, who's Caucasian, says to one of her clients who was Latina, here's this job, here's this training program. I think you should really decide, like decide now. This is a really good thing for you. And the client said, I really need to ask my family about this because I want their opinion. And the case manager said, no, 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 no. This is not about asking your family. We're really about, and I think they use the word self-sufficiency. We talk about self-sufficiency here in the welfare office, so you need to decide. So the client decides right then and there, gets into the training program, and guess what? It didn't work. And she failed the program, or actually maybe the program failed her, but we were doing a training on this, and the case manager said, now that I've heard you talking, I think it's really important that we should have involved the family as part of the decision making. So you can play with that, by the way, as people are writing in about, quote, what self-directed life means. It might vary according to your culture. So yeah, and people are writing in things. Is somebody saying, absolutely, I think this is why I'm wrestling with the definition. I'm defining, and you could actually, you know what? I always say, take what you like and work the best. Leave the rest. Explore what I want out of life, work on a plan. Sometimes self-directed includes consulting your family. Yeah, absolutely. Versus doing as the caseworker says is best. And it could have been, when people make decisions, it's a whole thing about, what is it, a childcare issue? Who knows? So we'll play with that. And actually, this kind of goes back to the definition. And when they broke it down, by the way, that they said in terms of the dimensions of recovery or health. So what do you want when you get into recovery? Obviously, health, or when you're helping people get into recovery, do you help them with their health? Absolutely. Some of you help people with their homes. And we know that that's an important part of recovery as well. For those of you who work with people to help people find a purpose, that's part of a recovery too. And kind of going back to that initial question about, why you do what you do, I think it's just important that people have a purpose. I've been told as I get older that, when people retire, you really need to have a purpose in life, whatever that is, and that can vary for people, and that people also need community. And you could tell this year about with people either living solo or living with family members, but not seeing other family members. Many of us have lost a lot of the community or the way we used to interact. We're not doing it just yet, but hopefully in the future. All right. So the relapse or return to use. And so remember, I told you at the beginning, I put in return to use because, again, from a person-centered language, that's what people are using. And let's take a look at this. It's kind of wordy, but here's where we got an unfolding process in which the resumption of substance use is the last event. And as many of you know, sometimes when people relapse and actually start to use, there has been a lot of stuff that's going on. And it could be, as the bullet says, a long series of maladaptive responses to internal or external stressors or stimuli, which is some fancy term for stressors from outside, stressors from inside. So we have those internal stimuli that if you're feeling sad, depressed, anxious, you can't really run away from that. And so it can be internal and can be external. And there's a term, Alan Marlett came up with this term in 2005, but Jen Kearns actually talked about it again in 2020, and it's a term called the abstinence violation effect. And what that means is that it occurs when an individual has a lapse that results in excessive guilt and shame. So do you ever hear of situations where, let's say somebody's been in recovery for a long time and they've been going to NA for 10 years, and they think of themselves as a recovering person, and that sometimes when they relapse, and it could be a variety of reasons, that the shame or guilt from the relapse causes them not to get into recovery right away, or get back into recovery right away. And I've seen this, unfortunately, with people I've known, including counselors, who relapse and then it takes them 3 years to get back. So it does not have to, by the way, but just to be aware that sometimes that abstinence violation effect can be uh, can really mess people up. Again, that's not my clinical thing. I was just looking at my notes, and when I Googled abstinence violation effect, I think Jen Kearns, this is what she wrote, and I'm quoting her, by the way. She said it's, quote, effing up and continuing to use. So my word, her words, not my words. And you hear too, for example, when people, let's say they've been going to AA for 15 years and then they relapse and then they go back, and people usually will say, my name is so and so, and I have, used to be, I had 15 years. Now it's like I have 2 days. That sometimes people will end up going to meetings in different places, or again, not getting back into recovery. So moving right along. So a lapse or a slip. Now, this is another definition that sometimes people will disagree with, and that's okay. But a lapse or a slip is an isolated incident of substance use or isolated episodes of behavior change, not immediately resulting in return to old using patterns. And as I was saying, some of my friends in recovery disagree with this because they feel like a slip is a slip is a slip. But the key, by the way, is that when people do slip, they have maybe an isolated incident. They were someplace, somebody was giving out alcohol, they had a drink, and then they go right back into recovery. So you can write in what you think about it, but it tends to be as part of it's part of the literature on relapse. So then, what is relapse prevention? As I said, relapse is predictable, and it is a set of strategies aimed at meeting the challenges people in recovery face in maintaining their recovery. So I was looking at the calendar today about what holidays are coming up. So depending on what you celebrate, so Passover is coming up, Easter is coming up, Eid al-Fitr is coming up in May. So there's 3 major religions that are celebrating. And that when you work with people, or if you go in the days when you could go home and be at a dinner with lots of people, you knew that people would you'd have to figure out for yourself, what am I going to do? How am I going to stay in recovery? And there's a whole variety of things that you can do. Actually, somebody wrote in privately, slip, sobriety loses its priority. Thank you. I like that. So going back to relapse prevention, again, I always say you don't have to be a rocket scientist, but to really look at what are some of the strategies you are going to face. I'm in Weight Watchers in like long-term recovery, and so now with the holidays, they'll tell us actually how many points some of the foods are, like chocolate bunnies. But they'll also talk about what are you going to do? What are you going to eat instead? How are you going to figure that out? And coming up with a plan. So that's relapse prevention. Now, these antecedents to relapse, was published again recently. And some of these came out also again many years ago. But when they talk about why people relapse, the biggest one, by the way, is the negative emotional state. So that's a fancy term for, could be fear, sadness, anger, depression. Think about what's gone on in the past year. And even if you're healthy, sometimes feeling sad, sometimes feeling lonely, those are all negative emotional states. Many of our clients, and some of you, by the way, may be in recovery from, let's say, depression as well. So it's important to kind of look at that when people are depressed for long periods of time, it could be an antecedent to relapse. In addition, social pressure to use. I don't know if that's the same this past year as it was prior to COVID, where people would be going to, let's say people would have parties at the job. Now, I've worked at many of the agencies that I've worked at or done consulting at that are drug related, usually do not serve alcohol at their holiday parties, but some of them do. So is there social pressure to use? Taking it back to the job, that some jobs actually have a lot of social pressure to use. So that's the second one. And then interpersonal conflict. If you're having a lot of, let's say we'll keep it job related. If you're having a lot of conflicts with your supervisors or your coworkers, or people at home as well, that can cause or is an antecedent to relapse. Anybody else want to add anything? What might you add? So if you would like to write in. Oh, an agency I recently worked at held their holiday party in the casino. That was triggering. Yeah, I did a training once on relapse prevention at a casino in Reno, and a lot of the people were in recovery from gambling. And while I was teaching, you could hear all those machines going off. They were not happy, but it was in Nevada. That seems where a lot of conferences or trainings were done. Loss of routines, people, jobs, social events, weekly. Absolutely. Sudden changes in every day. Thank you. Feelings of helplessness, loss, depression, loneliness. They've done some studies on, actually, with some animal studies about with rats of what would they really choose. Would they choose to hang out with other rats, or would they choose heroin? Guess what they chose? They chose to hang out with other rats. So they preferred socialization rather than heroin. Now, unfortunately, if somebody's using methamphetamines, it's the opposite. So that if people are using methamphetamines, or the rats who are using methamphetamines would choose methamphetamines over socialization. But think about what socialization has looked like this past year. And I can't see you, obviously, and if I were in person, we'd be talking about all the things we've gone through this year. But I mean, now we're all on Zoom. So think about it. So it's really a challenge. What's not on there, by the way, and it's usually like the fifth or sixth, is that sometimes when people are going through positive emotional states, they can relapse. And so sometimes you'll hear of somebody who gets a job, or who gets a promotion, or celebrates their anniversary of recovery or their birthday, and then sometimes they might relapse. Okay. Oh yeah, it's called eustress. And the thing about eustress is that even if it's a good thing, that it also can cause people to relapse. It's kind of ironic because these days you hope that you have things that are like positive, but just to realize that. Yeah, thank you for writing that in. So early versus late warning signs. Yes, could be overwhelming. That's the new feeling. Absolutely. Whenever I talk to people, either who I'm related to or my friends or in different groups, that's what people seem to be dealing with. And again, I think it's the length. And I know there's hope. We hope. And this too shall pass, but I think feeling overwhelmed. Many of my friends who are therapists are feeling overwhelmed because they never had so many clients before. Like it just goes on and on and on. And they're in their homes on Zoom. And a friend of mine said that she could see more clients on Zoom than she would be able to in person. So Many people are exhausted who are in the helping profession. And then what happens is that some of our clients are very needy. They were needy before. Maybe the neediness is, I think, magnified. And so that can affect us as well. Yeah, it's hard to break old habits and feelings. Absolutely. So part of this is the early versus late warning signs. And when you've taken probably other relapse prevention courses, we always know that it's important really to help people figure out, and for yourselves as well, since this is about relapse prevention for recovering people who are working in the field, is what are the early warning signs, so that you can really kind of nip them in the bud. And one of the first things to figure out is, they always use that term addictive thinking, which probably goes against some of the vocabulary about what's appropriate to use. But one of the things is when people start, let's say somebody starts thinking about using and they haven't used a substance in a long time. When you think about it, sometimes it could increase your cravings for it. And cravings are physiological. And for people in early recovery, it's kind of it's a normal part of early recovery to have cravings. For sometimes for people who've been in longer term recovery, that many of you don't experience the same kind of cravings that you did when you were in early recovery. But the key, by the way, is that, again, they'll say thoughts lead to actually behavior. So to kind of figure out, what am I going to do with the thoughts? There are actually Rick Rawson, who's done a lot of work actually he wrote the Matrix model, which is about recovery from cocaine, but now he's doing a lot of work with methamphetamines. And he was saying that you could do thought stopping, like you could imagine your craving as being like a light switch and you're turning it off, or so you're visualizing it. You used to hear of situations where people would wear a rubber band, and then if they had a thought, or like if they cursed, they would wear it around their wrist and then they'd snap it, and that would kind of take them out of their thinking. Yeah, I'm just reading what somebody's writing. Yeah, I'm doing more at home than in the office. Used to be a time where I left work issues at the office and home issues at home, but now the office is home and it feels like no escape. I think that's what people are struggling with. I'm just thinking actually, because I've been sitting at this desk for, I think I didn't expect to be sitting at my desk at home for so many hours, but I'm grateful I have one. But who would have thought? So yeah, when our commute is like from going to the bedroom to the wherever you do your work, and some people are fortunate. I have a second bedroom which is used as the office, so that's pretty cool. And for many people, if you're doing this from the kitchen table or wherever you are, that can be a challenge. But yeah, so when you get emails late at night, you're like, and they're work related, do you answer them? I'm gonna say, when I used to be going to the office every day, when I got home, I would often put my cell phone on mute, or I'd leave it on mute by accident so I wouldn't hear things. Now I feel like I have to listen, and I just started actually turning it on to mute again at about 9 o'clock, so that I can't hear what people are writing to me late at night. So going back to this, so it's really that process. So it's like thinking, it builds again physiologically, then it kind of goes down to emotional building. And, when people start to feel scared, and actually as people have been writing in about feeling overwhelmed and not having a place to kind of discharge that, then it can lead to the behavior. So it's really a process, and it's not necessarily, something that happens immediately. Oh, yes. Thank you for writing in. It's hard to know when to turn off the work brain when working from the homesteading. Absolutely. And again, like, personally, I'm grateful I have a job, but it's the challenge is, when do you do that? That's a rhetorical question, so you don't have to answer that. So the key actually is, I remember somebody I know who is a counselor was telling me that when he started thinking, he would get irritable, and he'd get irritable for no special reason. Like he'd be going to his job, he'd be on the bus in the Bronx, he was irritable. And what happened to him was he figured out later on, probably as a result of returning to use, that the irritability, if he didn't deal with it or kind of work it through, uh, led or started the process of return to use for him. It doesn't mean that you're not irritable for whatever. Sometimes there's a reason to be irritable, but to know, when you get that feeling like you feel like annoyed by everything. So you want to kind of think it out. The key, by the way, it's much easier to deal with early warning signs than late warning signs, because often late warning signs are it's too late. All right. So here's something. Actually, this you can write in, by the way. You know what I was saying about warning signs? And I'll ask you maybe to write in that a lot of times warning signs, and for yourself, you probably know it. You don't have to say if it's for you personally, but there's usually physical reasons why that people see, and it might be something like not sleeping or not eating or eating too much. It could be psychological, like feeling sad. It could be social. Another thing sometimes too with some of the warning signs is sometimes people will use other behaviors. So they might start gambling or having lots of sex or shopping. Not that you could shop so much anymore. Well, actually, you can shop online, but so that can be actually problematic as well. But what's going on for a person socially? For some people, when they're on the road to relapse, they start to isolate. This might have been before the pandemic. And then for some people, that sense of spirituality, and spirituality not necessarily meaning religion, but a connection with the higher power and feeling hopeless. So when people feel hopeless, and they remain hopeless for a while, that can be a warning sign. So if people feel like writing in, what would you add for warning signs? And they could be biological. Actually, many of them overlap. That's why we have overlap in the middle. But what are some warning signs to relapse that you're aware of? It could be for other people. So physically, psychologically, socially, or spiritually. Please write in. Yeah, isolation. Yes. Other people, what comes to mind? Yeah, insomnia and a decrease in hygiene. Yes. So again, physical things you can see. Actually, people have been struggling with, I think, insomnia from the pandemic. All right, let's see. Thank you, everybody. I have someone close to me who, when they report being more social, it's my cue that they have returned to use. So it's the opposite. Thank you. Their appearance goes down. Negative feelings covers a lot. Yes. Fear from threats to housing, safety, sadness from death, anniversaries, loved ones. Away, needing money. Poor medication adherence. Yes. Never available for things. Apathy. So there's a whole variety of things that you might see. And as I'm looking at your list, so, some of them are physical, lots of them are psychological, and some of them are social and spiritual as well. So the key is for yourself, and you don't have to answer this right now, is just knowing your own warning signs of what do you do physically that could tell you you're starting to on the road to relapse. What do you do psychologically? What do you do socially? What do you do spiritually? So I'm going to segue to triggers. So we know that a trigger is a stimulus that has been repeatedly associated with preparation for, anticipation of the use of alcohol or other drugs, often called persons, places, or things. So I will ask you to write in, what are some triggers? I'm on the next two slides, by the way, I'm going to talk about triggers on the job. But what are some common triggers that your clients have told you about? What are things that they deal with, or like what are their persons, places, or things? Peers, yes. Old friends, yes. Relationship issues. Oh, getting blood taken. Changes out of their control. And then, lately, there's been a lot of changes out of our control. Specific clinicians are triggers. Interesting. Family, yes. I'm laughing because I am. Oh, having PTSD, crowds, children. This is a little bit of everything, right? Social events, activities, the COVID-19 isolation, family's popular answer, boredom, Facebook drama, financial concerns. In fact, one of the big things that I was in a course I was doing on trauma is that when people have lost their jobs during the pandemic, it really exacerbates any kind of trauma they've had. So if you're worried about financial concerns, then that can be, again, creates negative emotional states, not a healthy place to be. Yeah, lots of loss this year. Issues with access to medical care or housing, yes. Government and politics, yes, it's been a crazy year. Or that's my non-clinical, that's my opinion. The news, mental health needs, unmet mental health needs. Yes, we got it. Thank you. The police. So you can see as you're able to look, yeah, the news is a big one. In fact, sometimes every time lately when I watch the news, the very first thing they talk about with COVID is the variants. And what I'm trying to do is not pay attention to it, and not that I don't want to pay attention to it, but it in the news from last night, I'm speechless on that one. So it's been a tough, tough, tough time. So persons, places, or things are sometimes the things that we know of, or when like people were writing about old friends, or maybe people that they used to use with, or places that they used to use. But I think COVID-19 has added a whole bunch of things. Okay, so these two slides, yeah, fear. And actually, fear is a big one, especially because fear is a negative emotional state. I was pausing because I think in sometimes what'll happen with fear is in 12-step programs, we'll talk about fear as face everything face everything and recover. There's another word I won't say where you can like face everything and run. Oh yeah, right away, whenever there's some kind of news that people with mental illness always get blamed, and that's not the reality, by the way, or the statistics are people with mental illness usually do not commit serious crimes, but it certainly is kind of the news to highlight that. But yeah, I was thinking about that too, so there's a shooting in Colorado in a supermarket. Last week there was a killing of 8 people in spas in Atlanta. And if you had ever had any kind of shooting or something, it also re-triggers people or re-traumatizes people. So it's been a tough time. So Let me take it back to triggers on the job. So when I worked at Gracie Square Hospital with a woman named Nancy Lipton, we came up with this list of what we looked at is triggers on the job. So I'll read them, and there'll be a second list. But here are things to, you could look for example at yourself if these apply to you, but if you're also dealing with clients who are going back to work. One of the big ones is active drinking or drugging by other employees. I could tell you stories about which agencies in New York have lots of drinking and drugging, but I won't mention any in particular. But many agencies, I struggle with that. Required business meetings, when we used to have to go to business meetings in person. So sometimes that would be a trigger in terms of drinking. Here's some for us: too much pressure on the job. So if you have too much pressure, that could be a trigger. Another one, inability to get along with the supervisor. So the thing about work we used to talk about from a rehabilitation point of view is usually you used to spend like 40 of your best waking hours on the job. And so if there's people you don't get along with on the job, that can be extremely difficult as well. So not being able to get along with a supervisor. Too little supervision. I worked with some people who they worked, I think, for the housing authority, and they would be able to, I don't know, go to different parts of some of the housing authorities, and people didn't pay attention to where they were, and they were by themselves a lot. Yeah, going back to that inability. So it seems as people are writing in the hostile environment, interpersonal conflict, that all really affects people. I think there was an article last Sunday in one of the papers about why people leave jobs, and a lot of it is that interpersonal conflict on the job. Yeah, not feeling valued. Absolutely. So I think the person who had too little supervision was somebody who worked for one of the bridge authorities, and he would have to stay in this office by himself, working the night shift, and there was nobody there, and he had a lot of time, and it was very difficult for him. So those are some of the triggers on the job. Another big one is, oh, did I miss payday on that one? Oh, let me go back. Oh, I skipped payday on this one, but payday was always a big time for missing work, or and it depends. Like these days, everybody seems to get their pay online, so it goes to your bank and then you use your card. Sometimes people were dealing with getting tips, and so having access to cash was also very difficult as well. So let me see what people are writing. Yes, on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, level 5 is self-actualization, personal and job and life satisfaction to reach your potential. And in an ideal world, by the way, and luckily for many of us on Maslow's hierarchy, we can self-actualize. But for some people, when you look at the bottom is like food, water, and shelter. The second one is safety. Third one is relationships. And actually, work meets all of those needs, by the way, usually. And so it just speaks to, again, of, where you are. And actually, if you are at a job where you're feeling self-actualized, I think that is really, from a book rehab point of view, a really good place to be. All right, let me go back to the next one. Oh yeah, working from home, no structure. The commute, if you do have a commute. Toxic working environment. Yeah, those are all things that I think, being overworked. These are, again, all triggers on the job. Yes, some of you haven't stopped working in the office. And again, because I can't really see or talk to people individually, I can't always get a sense of who's in their office. And who's at home, and there's pros and cons to all of them, by the way. So for yourselves, you can know what that is. All right, so lots of things of people writing in. Let me go to the next one. Again, more triggers for on the job. Actually, working excessive overtime. I know a lot of people like to get overtime, but if you work too much, you can get really tired, and that can cause people to relapse. Oh yeah, you know what, that as somebody wrote in, working from home is a lot, especially when you have children at home as well. I actually have a case study that, if I get to it, involves that. So some of you who are working at home at your job are also teaching your children at the same time. You've become math teachers and English teachers, and that is it's been challenging. So yeah, train ridership is decreased, helps with social anxiety. So yes, so that's looking at it from a positive point of view. But again, so going back up to working excessive overtime. Oh yeah, it sounds like a lot of good work stuff is coming up in the chat. When you lose a coworker and more responsibility is put on you, and you know that always happens. I think as my brother always says, the harder you work, the more work you get. Something like that. Accessibility of petty cash. You may not have access to this, by the way, on your jobs, but some people do. Although I was thinking there have been agencies where people did have access to petty cash and people stole it. So that is important. Yeah, my brother didn't make that up, by the way, but it's something that he says because we come from a family where we work a lot, where we like to work. Yeah, again, as people are writing in, you could see, and you know, again, people's own health this year has been challenging. Okay, so I appreciate, again, I'm going to not read everything that people are writing in, but it's actually, it is really interesting, I think, to see people's experiences, because like when I made up this trigger list, it was pre-COVID, and I didn't really change it that much, but just to I think it's really important to go through them for yourselves or for your clients. Oh yeah, the working with people that have tested positive because of the HIPAA laws remain confidential. I think I was saying in another training that agencies have to have their own, they have to follow the CDC recommendations, but you still have to follow the law. It's kind of like when people, it's like with contact tracing, you can be you can tell somebody they have been exposed to, like, you know, in the old days, or still HIV, but you can't name a person. Same thing with COVID. Yeah, and I'm just glad you're enjoying the webinar. And as somebody wrote in, a different set of rules for the staff, which at times can be frustrating when you are a dedicated worker and other people do the minimum. I hear that a lot, and that is frustrating to many people. Yeah, that whole thing about with overcrowding. I have two of my sisters are nurses, and my sister in New Jersey is a nurse. She chose to work with COVID patients, and one of the reasons she said she did was she'd rather be working with people who knew their status than not. So she has not gotten sick, although she's been vaccinated. So yeah, thank you again for people writing in, because this year has, I think, changed kind of our stress levels in a different way. And for those of you in recovery, they could be triggers. Will they be on the job? They're related to the job, and I think that's important as well. So you could see that, you could read the list, by the way: boredom, job dissatisfaction. When people don't like their jobs, that really affects one's life. Working a rotating shift or a graveyard shift. Actually, some of you, if anybody's a nurse, that, you know, or some of you who do work in residential, that can be a trigger as well. Thanks again, everybody, for writing in. fact, I think my next question was going to be, but I think you started to answer it. Like, what triggers would you add at work for counselors and peer advocates? So it seems like, as people can read in the chat, it's like a little bit of everything. So if you're working at home, there's triggers. If you're going into the job, that is stressful. It's stressful kind of all around. So I'll encourage you again to read the chat. And again, thank you for writing so many things in. I was just thinking, some of the peer advocates that I've met or worked with in the past, the change in the job from, maybe they were out in the community and now they're on Zoom. And for a lot of people, by the way, learning to work through Zoom has created some challenges and increased stress for people as well. I know there's a decent amount of courses on it, like how do you show empathy during Zoom? Certainly there are ways to do it, but some of you were trained up to work with people in person, and that has been, I think, a challenge. So I'm going to move on. All right. Here's some cue extinction tools. These are evidence-based, by the way, and I'm just going to go over them because cue extinction is a fancy term for if you have a craving. You could do this for yourself, by the way, and you could do this for your clients, but these things do work. And one of the first ones, which I think, I won't say it's easy, but deep relaxation. And what that really means is breathing. And I know every self-care course I've either taught or have been to, or any meditation group I have been to, will teach people about mindfulness around breathing, about inhaling, pausing, exhaling, and just doing that and trying not to think about other things. Easier said than done, but it's a good practice. Oh, yeah. Okay, yes. And somebody wrote in, our peer advocates started delivering Narcan to the community due to the increase in fentanyl overdoses, working way too many hours and needed to stop and take care of himself. And that's great that he did that, because I think the stress of that, and for those of you who are peers, in my experience, sometimes one of the reasons I always liked working with peers is because I really liked working with people in early recovery or early-ish recovery. And yet there's many ways you have to protect yourself. So I think that is really helpful as well. Going back to the breathing, there's a lot of, again, I said courses on mindfulness. And, it's funny because I don't know if you ever do this, but I was trying this morning is, you breathe in, you pause, you breathe out, and you're supposed to just follow your breath. And all I could think of was, oh, I have a webinar today. Oh, I got to cook something later. Oop. And I was thinking of like every problem I could think of, but you're not supposed to judge yourself for it. You're supposed to just kind of be with it and keep doing it. So, but the good thing about deep relaxation is you could do it anywhere. You don't need any money or any equipment. And I mean, you could do it on the subway, and you could do it in your office. You could do it at your home. So it's a good thing to do. Another one is delay plus behavioral alternatives. What that used to mean, like when I was in fourth grade, they used to tell us if you were angry, count to 10 before you punch somebody. And the idea is if you delay and you think you do something else that's positive, by the way. So that's why if you have a craving or you think you're going to relapse, you delay it, and then you call somebody, or you walk around the block, or you do whatever. Everybody has different of what really makes them feel better, or you listen to music, or you dance. So those are things that you can do as well. Negative and positive consequences is, again, very similar. It has people visualizing. The key, by the way, is that you don't want to just focus on the negative consequences. You want to also look at the positive consequences. So for example, if, let's say, as a peer, if you were to relapse, what would be the negative consequences? Okay, you could get fired, you could lose your job, you could overdose, you can get kicked out of your house. But also to end on, what are the positive consequences? You can keep your job. People talk about having the money that they might have spent if they relapsed, or they keep their self-respect. So that is done. You don't want to do that if people have, say, for example, people with schizophrenia. You don't want to do a lot of visualization on that one. So negative positive imagery, similar thing, or actually I just made a mistake and flipped it. It's actually having people imagine is a good tool. Just be careful with that. And then cognitive interventions. Many people are familiar with cognitive behavioral therapy, but cognitive interventions, so when somebody says, I just wanted to have one drink, and then the cognitive intervention that they would come up with is, I've never been able to use just once. Okay. You could do whole courses, by the way, on these cue extinction tools, and they're all good things to do in terms of relapse prevention. Now, I just added this case study, and this kind of goes with what people I think were saying before. Now, whenever I make up a case study, I thought, oh, who should I name it after? And then I get nervous, people might think I'm naming it after people I know. So I named it after myself. So here's just an example. So Mary is in recovery from heroin and alcohol for 6 years. She's a counselor at a recovery agency. She used to go to NA and AA 3 times a week before COVID. This past year, she is working from home and also taking care of her 3-year-old. She has a child who is 9 years old and taking classes at home. She feels overwhelmed. So these were all things that I think you wrote in. So what do you think are the warning signals? What are some of the warning signals? Anybody want to write in? Or is it too obvious? Oh yeah, she stopped going to meetings. Yep. Feeling of overwhelm. Thanks, everybody. Yes, so people, again, that stop being going to meetings. Overwhelmed, isolating, not taking on situations by yourself. I didn't write in here if she was a single mother or not, so I just made it up. And yeah, focusing on her children and not herself. Certainly for those of you who are mothers, you know that you often focus on your child before you focus on yourself. And I think sometimes society expects that, but when people always have to look at their recovery and how you kind of nourish yourself. Yeah, she said she was overwhelmed. So thanks. So, and people have started to answer, what would you advise? Yeah, reconnect with recovering friends. Yeah, again, the word overwhelmed seems to be the word of the year. But you can just imagine how, and some of you I know are doing this, you're working from home and you have children, or you're going to work and you have children, so you're dealing with childcare issues. And yeah, carving out me time. People sometimes think when people carve out like self-care, sometimes people think self-care is selfish, but it definitely is not. And well, I have some guidelines for self-care on here as well. So yeah, it sounds like she's shutting down, carving out me time. Yeah, it really is essential. Yeah, and thanks. I'll read what somebody wrote that was sent to me. I tell my clients that when you're on an airplane, you put the oxygen mask on yourself before your children so you can save them. Yes. So self-care is giving the world the best of you instead of what's left of you. Absolutely. Oh, somebody wrote in, can we get Mary a sitter or some respite? Yeah, one would hope. I have a niece who lives down the hall, and she had a baby in October, and now they were like going back to work. Actually, they're working from home, she and her husband, but they had the baby. Now the baby goes to a daycare center, but around like December, January, February, I volunteered during my lunchtime to take the baby out. Now I was doing it for myself, by the way. I was getting a lot out of it. I was hanging out with the baby. I was walking around my town, but as my niece said, it just gave her time to take a shower or to do nothing or to eat. And so we were saying it really takes a village these days, but unfortunately, our society doesn't always help with that. So I think there's a lot that can be done with that. But I think, again, the key and actually, it's on the next slide around some self-care. And actually, as somebody wrote in, can we get Mary a sitter or some respite? If you could, that would be really great if she had somebody who could come in and she could take a nap for an hour, or somebody she could go for a walk or do something. Yeah, thank you, Sarah, for writing it. Then I would ask, how many drinks did you have this week? This case study isn't telling us if Mary has increased her use and her recovery is being compromised. You bet. I was specifically, by the way, general, and didn't really speak about that. But yeah, but those are questions you would want to know. There's been this whole thing about people drinking, and this whole culture around, when you see people like comedians talking about quarantinis and people drinking at 10 in the morning and people who never used to drink. And it seems like, remember, like the liquor stores were essential businesses. So when all the other stores were closed, the liquor stores were opened. So were the cigar stores around around where I live. So, and there were reasons again for the liquor stores being open. All right, so you've heard this before, but I think you can never hear things too much, by the way. One is take care of your own needs. Easy for me to say from my apartment to wherever you are, but really, what are your needs? And doing good things for your spirit. And you don't have to do, and actually, if people can write in what you do, because sometimes doing good things for your spirit, it doesn't have to take an hour. Sometimes it could take 3 minutes or 5 minutes. Exercising daily, even just getting out for a walk, balancing work and play. So actually, here is a question for you. So in terms of your self-care, and I will ask people to write this in, what has changed for you as a result of COVID-19? And I mean this in terms of, what have you done to take care of yourself that might be different now than before COVID? So what has changed for you as a result of COVID-19 in terms of self-care? So if people would please write in. And I will read some of these. I will not read names if I don't forget. I do more reading now that I have a tablet I needed for increased online time. Weight gain. I don't know if that fits into the positive ones, but sharing that time with my loved ones, we would self-care together, my mom, siblings, and I. Many people have talked about that, of really time with family members that they normally didn't have time for. So for some people, relationships have really improved. Taking vitamins, especially D3, focus on emotional, self-care, physical health, focusing on future goals in my relationships. I have found many free virtual meditation events on Eventbrite, and they have really helped. Yeah, there's a lot of, the good thing about Eventbrite and a lot of things, actually on YouTube, you could kind of learn anything around meditation, yoga for free. What else are people doing for your self-care? Oh, getting massages, helping out the community with food and prayer. Yeah, remember, it's like prayer and meditation, they increase endorphins, and it also gives people that connection. And actually helping the community with food does that too. Yoga, focusing on gaining more knowledge, trainings and workshops for free. focusing on helping others, showing empathy, going outside. So easy to stay indoors all day when you live on Zoom. Yes. Volunteer at the food pantry. So it seems like some of you are, actually, those are all self-care things. And it's kind of meeting some physical needs, some psychological, some social needs, some spiritual needs. The key is actually is to figure out for yourself what works. I'm going to say one advantage of not commuting is the time that was spent commuting. Now I can do long meditations in the morning or some of those things that I used to do. Yeah, exercise, movies, running, lots of time with pets. Actually, many people bought pets this year. Oh, went back to school actually to get your bachelor's. Yeah, uh actually that's a good thing. You know, and some people have had like goals like that, where they've gotten back to school or figured out they wanted to learn Spanish or looked at what are some of the, learn how to knit or sew. There's a whole variety of things. A backyard barbecue. I like that one. Oh yeah, 3 Zoom peer support meetings 7 days a week for a year straight. Thank you again for sharing this. I facilitated most of these, so I was connected with addicts, alcoholics every day throughout the pandemic, and the connection, yes, is vital. 90 and 90, supersized. I think that's really great. And it's, that whole thing about connection, if you can't see people in person, you can still connect on Zoom. I mean, sometimes it's not like the best way, but it is a way to do that. Thank you. Yeah, it does. As somebody wrote in, that sounds amazing. Hey, golf is a lot of social distancing. Way to go, Lynn. Family, nature, music, puzzles, board games. I have to confess, I bought a paint by numbers set, and then I set it on a table last week to prepare. And I haven't done it yet, but maybe tonight I'll do it. Yeah, it's easier actually to do a 90 and 90 these days is much easier. Actually, in 30 days, much easier. People I know are going to meetings in Australia or all over the world because you can do that. Oh, yeah, diamond art, diamond painting, cooking classes. So there's a whole variety of things. The key is, I used to joke with some of my friends a while ago. We'd say, so what have you done well for yourself, even if it only took 5 minutes? And so ask yourself that in the evening of what can you do? What did you do for yourself, even if it's only a couple of minutes? Yeah, I can't wait to travel. Me too. Oh, I should make myself a pot of tea and do sip and paint. All right. Maybe when I do my next, actually, I think my next webinar is in a couple of weeks. So if I haven't done it by then, I'm never going to do it, but I will. Yeah, drinking water is a good one. There's a lot of things in terms of nutrition, again, that are simple. The Caribbean islands are missing me. Thanks, Wilfred. I know people who are going, by the way, but it's, I guess we all make our decisions about travel, about what, hopefully we will. How comfortable are you? And depending on, actually now in New York, I don't know New Jersey or some of the other states you're from, more people have access to vaccines if that's what you choose to go. Oh, sorry, you're making me laugh, but that's a good thing that your wife won't let you go. Okay, thank you. Laughing increases endorphins, and yes, laughing is really important as well. So the key, by the way, is, think about what you're going to be doing each day to improve your self-care. You all are giving me some good ideas about what to do. So taking it back, people are familiar with HALT. Am I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? So people I know are telling me stories about how they never said they were lonely till this year, but they were always hungry and tired because they were working really hard and commuting. So just to kind of know, and actually taking it back to one's own recovery, these are actually things that you can do, but ask yourself, and then if you're hungry, eat something. I think you could also, hungry doesn't, for me, it sometimes includes thirst. And somebody said about drinking water, but sometimes when you're thirsty, you can get cravings for other things as well. So water can be really helpful with that. How's my thinking? Am I happy to go to work? I put go in parentheses, by the way, because it depends whether you're going to work at home or you're going to work at a place. Am I unhappy about going to work? And for those of you who believe in a higher power, how's my connection with my higher power? So for some people in 12-step groups, or you don't have to be in 12-step groups to have a connection to a higher power, but sometimes that could be really helpful as well to kind of know what that connection it is. It gives people hope. Yes, I did know that unfortunately domestic violence has increased due to COVID. That and a lot of child abuse has really increased very, very much. Because, and it's why, by the way, as you're doing, say, Zoom calls, this might be a whole nother training, but how you kind of figure out whether somebody's safe or not. And whether they can do a Zoom call at home, is it safe for them? And is it safe for you as well? So just to kind of know that. So those are some of the tools. Other sources of support. So for counselors and peers, it's helpful to have counseling yourself. However you do that, self-help programs, including Al-Anon. Al-Anon is a 12-step program for families or relatives of alcoholics. But if you are working in a treatment center, you are working with people who are alcoholics or addicts. So Al-Anon is a good one. Using a sponsor if you have a sponsor. Clinical supervision. I say that all the time. And hopefully people are getting clinical supervision. And some of the examples actually that some of you just gave about what you're doing for your peers, because I think that is super important. Finding a mentor. So sometimes people have a sponsor, but finding a mentor at work is also really helpful. And also other supports, spiritual or religion or religious support. So the key is there's many sources of support. How do you use them? I know one agency I did a training for, they have support groups. They have Zoom support groups pretty regularly. On Monday, they have one. It's like meeting at the water cooler. Because remember when, I don't know when the last time I went to a water cooler or whatever. I mean, when we were at NDRI, we had a room with a water cooler. And so sometimes you would have, you'd go to the water cooler and you'd talk to somebody, and that's how you found out a lot of information, or you were able to socialize. So can't always do that if you're working at home. And so it's important to have people to talk to. And then they also have different meditation Zoom meetings as they go along. And many agencies are also having we used to have group supervision at a job that I had way back, and it was really helpful to be working with my peers. Yeah, so as people are writing in, all of jobs now have people to talk. Yeah, if you're at the job site, yes. If you're not at the job site, then it's a little different one. And again, clinical supervision is so important. And when I hear sometimes when people leave or people are short-staffed, clinical supervision stops, and that is a real danger. If you can't get it, I know friends of mine who used to get clinical supervision. They would actually set up their own peer supervision groups, and it would be in the evenings or different times. I mean, now you could do it on Zoom. That'd be pretty easy. All right. So, are there any questions? So you can write in any questions. I'm going to say that the purpose of this course, remember, I started looking at relapse prevention for recovering counselors and peer advocates. So we talked about relapse, I guess not just for us, but for other people as well. So I really appreciate, by the way, the fact of all those write-ins. that would be really helpful. So I hope this was helpful. My next webinars, I think, are going to be, one is going to be on men who have sex with men, methamphetamines, and HIV. And I'm also going to do one on integrating vocational rehabilitation into treatment. I think they're towards the end of April, so that I do hope I see you again. And you know that I often put this at the end of my webinars. And I'll be quiet and you can just take in the hope. And again, I think the gift that you give, and as peers and counselors, you give hope to people, and not fake hope, but you give hope, and that is such a gift.